In the name of God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit.
Amen.
We've all heard the word, and maybe we've used it ourselves, and I'm sure that we have been called this unknowingly. Crackpot. We ascribe this label to people who don't quite fit the mold. People who view the world in radically different ways, like conspiracy theorists, who see sinister hidden forces everywhere. The Illuminati, the Bilderberg Group. I'm a member of both. We're good people. Some people target the Masons, or aliens in Area 51, and more recently, the Deep State. Each of those organizations devoted to manipulating people and gaining power so that they can control the world. And for all we know, there may be some kernel of truth in some of these claims. But what all of these people share in their own divergent way is a desire to impose order on insensible chaos, of which we have plenty. There must be some deeper, concealed plot at play that, if exposed, would unlock the mystery and make sense of it all, and then we could understand why what's going on around us is. At the heart of every crackpot is a hunger, an emptiness longing to be filled. And if you are a crackpot, someone who sees things from an unusual angle, none of what I'm saying is meant to demean or condemn you, because the world is full of crackpots hoping to be filled. It's just that most people tend to seek other ways of filling that emptiness. Money, possessions, ideology, being important, always being right. Anything that can fill up that hole so that they can feel whole and complete again. Of course, all of those methods are futile. You can toss whatever you like into your emptiness and it's going to vanish in an instant, consumed like a black hole that eats light. And few, if any of us, are immune to this sense of emptiness. In fact, for the crackpots among us, among whom I include myself, we find ourselves in some very exalted company. Although he does not use the word crackpot, Lloyd John Ogilvy's inspiring book, Drumbeat of Love, The Unlimited Power of the Spirit as Revealed in the Book of Acts, tells us the apostles more than met this qualification as they waited in the upper room during the 10-day interval between Jesus' ascension and Pentecost. Emptiness, Ogilvy asked, they felt it with devastating insufficiency. They had experienced a life of high adventure with Jesus, but now, as they waited despairingly for the fulfillment of his promise and power, the words of hope seemed to mock their impotency and inadequacy. It is a terrible thing to have a passion with no power to live it. That's where the disciples were, gathered together like we are today, keeping the faith as best as they could, as we do. But the interval had now stretched out for 10 days. That's 3 times longer than between the crucifixion and the resurrection. Jesus did not give them a timetable, no due date for the Spirit's arrival. Sitting there, the thought was probably passing through their minds, well, it could be tomorrow, or it might be next year. And until it happened, they were powerless to do anything. I think anyone with the slightest scintilla of self-knowledge can resonate with that reality. Again, as Ogilvy wrote, we've all known it. A challenge to love when we have little capacity for it. a need to forgive others when we can't even forgive ourselves, a longing for wisdom and knowledge for life's demands when we can't figure out what to do with today. The unsettling needs of people when we have neither faith nor hope to believe that healing can take place. Into this bottomless divot, God comes with the sound of a tornado, a hurricane. In the apostles' hollow room, a mighty wind blew, and excitement and terror filled their hearts in equal measure. This was the breath of God that moved over the face of the deeps at the beginning of creation, the same breath that animated humanity and brought back life to the dry bones in the valley of Ezekiel's vision. This is the same whirlwind that protected and led the people of Exodus in their march from slavery, the very same whirlwind that answered Job in his desperate confusion. But that crush of life-giving air was merely the prelude. Then fire came down, separated and descended upon the apostles, and like the burning bush, it did not consume them, but consecrated them. It was the same fire of the pillar that lit the way and guided the Israelites in their wilderness journey, and a new way opened for the disciples. Moved by these obvious signs of God's presence, they unbarred the door and left that little room and entered into a spacious courtyard outside where people from far and near had gathered to celebrate the Jewish festival of Pentecost, honoring both the harvest and the law given by God to Moses. It was a dual festival that celebrated both the physical and the spiritual nourishment that only God can provide. All of these people were there hungry for consolation, burning for inspiration to be lifted up, but an obstacle stood in the way. All of them descendants of the arrogant people who tried to build the Tower of Babel. Their ancestors assumed that they could reach God on their own terms, through their own means. So he divided them, separated them with many languages that prevented easy communication. And what that meant from these people who had come far and wide was that even in their unity around the festival of Pentecost, they could not fully commune with one another in their joy. But the disciples had a story to share, one like none other, so their mouths opened and lungs poured forth air, and words emerged in every language. A unifying cacophony that empowered everyone present to hear with astonishment the wonders and the wisdom and the sacrifice of Jesus. The story flowed forth, praising God for the resurrection, and many hearts caught on fire with a new hope for a new life, where the constant quest to fill the void might finally end. Now, some disregarded what was happening as nonsense. They accused the disciples of being Episcopalians. Of being drunk, despite the very early hour. Hang on a second. Now today, we'd probably just dismiss them as a bunch of crackpots. And in a way, crackpots is exactly what the disciples were. Indeed, it was what they needed to be to receive the power to fulfill their mission, to fulfill their purpose in life. At a small secluded retreat center in south central Kentucky, there's a chapel with a baptismal font right inside the door on a simple plinth. And this font is like nothing I've ever seen. It's not made of marble or granite or mahogany. It's not festooned with precious metals or stones. It's just a plain pottery bowl with only one real distinguishing feature, a jagged crack that starts from the rim of the bowl and ends about an inch above the base. It is literally a crackpot baptismal font. It holds only enough water to baptize someone while the rest just pours out. This is a vision of what you and me as the church are meant to be. A big bunch of crackpots, viewed by many as ridiculous, but by some as the bearers and sharers of hope and grace. Now, we might view that crack inside of us as an ugly flaw, a liability to be covered over, concealed, and ignored. But a pot without a crack just contains things. And the Holy Spirit will not be contained. Instead of feeling ashamed about the cracks in our lives, we need to accept that without them, God would not be able to work through us as witnesses and agents of His promise to flood the world with love. Sometimes our cracks make us feel unworthy. And we are unworthy. Everyone is. You can't deserve or earn love. But God always works through crackpots, people who don't quite have it all together. And that means that God can work through anyone because nobody has it all together, no matter how hard they might try to convince you that they do. I mean, just think about biblical figures. Moses didn't have it all together. He murdered a man. And when God approached him, he argued that he was insufficient to serve God as an emissary to Pharaoh, insisting, "Let my people go." Elijah, a great prophet who told truth to power at a corrupt royal court, Elijah ran for his life when the king's mistress threatened to kill him, as if God didn't have his back the whole time. Peter denied Jesus at the crucial moment, and the rest of the disciples abandoned him altogether. Yet they were chosen as the messengers to bring good news to a world in desperate need for it. We might feel intimidated by the idea that any of us could be anything like one of them, in part because we know it's risky. There's a lot to lose, but there's even more to gain. If we make room and offer a sincere invitation, the Holy Spirit will fill our hearts with power. And the first step is to stop desperately trying to fill up our emptiness through our own useless means and ask God to do that for us instead. Then the wind and the fire of the Spirit will come and fill us, and in manifold ways, both small and great, our cracks, the source of so much embarrassment for us, will leak out God's life-giving love to the world. Those jagged tears will be transformed into sacred places where the glory of God abides and shines forth. And when that happens, our shame will be erased. And we will not madly scramble to plug it up. There will no longer be need to spin elaborate, shadowy tales to make sense of it all, because the wisdom of God brings understanding and peace when we can't understand. So, my fellow crackpots, let us accept and allow the grace of God to flow through our flaws, both real and perceived, to serve as a vessel of healing and fulfillment. Some will see it as sheer foolishness. Others might view it as some sort of sinister plot. But some will receive it for what it is, the answer we all yearn and search for, a way to find meaning and purpose in life, to find order in the chaos, and a way forward that is not dominated by fear, but by faith. That's the true mystery. The only one worth working on. It is a mystery that we cannot solve. Instead, God's mystery solves us. And as we are being solved by the Holy Spirit, we are also being saved and healed.